And right now we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick here with Katie Greifeld, taking you through to that closing bell. It's a global simulcast. Carol Massar and Emily Graffeo join us now. Welcome to our audiences across all of our Bloomberg platforms, television, radio, our partnership with YouTube here on a big day, at least if you're into the Supreme Court, which I'm told is hot these days, Carol Massar. A big Supreme Court ruling against those Liberation Day tariffs. The market reaction relatively muted, at least indirect reaction to it.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad you went there. We talked with our own Eric Weiner, who tracks the markets for us here at Bloomberg, and he said the same thing. He felt like the market's stuck. He expected kind of more upside to equities coming off of that, and to him it just speaks that there's just a lot of questions still out there, and investors just uncertainty over many things, and so not necessarily going all in on this.
Yeah, you can see that in what is actually up in the equity market and what's down. The Russell 2000, those economically sensitive stocks, that's actually finishing the day in the red, Katie.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you take a look at a stock like Nike actually finishing in the red, lower by about 0.2%, as Romaine Bostick, sitting next to me, knows well. Nike is very, very exposed to tariffs. And initially they spiked, finishing, though, as I mentioned, in the red. There's still obviously a lot of outstanding questions.
Yeah, I was going through this whole worksheet of like all the companies that are, have the biggest exposure to tariffs and to foreign sales. Obviously, you have automakers, you have, industrial companies like Caterpillar, obviously apparel companies like Nike and Lululemon. And when you look at the market reaction in most of them today, I think you get the sense that for a lot of investors, they feel like the worst had already been priced in. We get the closing bells here on this Friday. Remember, this was a shortened week here in the U.S. because of the President's Day holiday on Monday, so 4 straight days. And the net result is we're going to end in the green on the day, and it appears for the week as well. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is going to end out the day up by about 0.5%. The S&P 500 closing right around 69.09 and change, higher by about 48 points or 0.7%. The NASDAQ Composite adding 200 points or 0.9%. But the Russell 2000 getting left behind. It's going to drop by about 1 point. We'll call it unchanged on the day, but it is going to have red on the screen.
All right, so a little lower when it comes to those small caps. Back to the big caps I go, looking at the S&P 500, 334 names in that index actually higher today, Katie, 169 to the downside.
And you can see that that positive breath when you take a look at the sectors as measured by the circle. Look at all the green on the screen. In fact, your biggest gainer from a percentage basis was communication services today, higher by about 2.7%. A lot of that being driven by Alphabet. Consumer discretionary, though, real estate also leading gains here. In terms of what didn't quite perform, there's only 2 sectors that finished in the red today. Energy down about 0.7%. Going to be very important to keep an eye on that, and of course on the energy markets as we watch the geopolitical situation over the weekend, and also healthcare down about 0.3%.
Yeah, that energy trade interesting, and feeling like some of the tensions may be backing off, which is surprising considering some of the headlines. All right, let's go to some of the individual gainers, if I may, and it's Fix, FIX is the ticker, Comfort Systems, number 1 gainer in the S&P 500, hitting an all-time high today, at least intraday. That stock up about 6.5% here in the session. It provides heating, ventilation, air conditioning system, installation, all that good stuff. Firm reported revenue for the 4th quarter that beat the average analyst estimate. Keep in mind, this is a stock that has been on a tear this year. It's up about 60%, so some more momentum to the upside in today's trade. Flip it on over to General Electric, finishing just off its best levels of the session. It too hit an all-time high in the session today, finishing the day with a gain of about 2.5%. Morgan Stanley initiating with a recommendation of overweight, citing the engine manufacturer's durable services growth, strong pricing power, and pristine balance sheet. The analyst there says Wall Street underestimates, long-term free cash flow with further upside from earnings revisions and multiple expansion. They set a price target of $425 a share, stock closing at $343 and change. So some upside certainly on that one. Stock is up about 11% year to date. And then the number 1 gainer in the NASDAQ 100, we're talking about Alphabet, up about 4% here. And this one of the things that kind of stood out for me was a Wall Street Journal story that says that Google is exploring new ways to expand the market for its AI chips to better compete with NVIDIA. So the company increasing its financial support to a network of data center partners, including a potential $100 million investment in cloud computing startup FluidStack. But I think it's interesting as we get ready for NVIDIA's results.
Yeah,
Right.
NVIDIA results was that next Wednesday, right? The
Think so.
25th.
Yeah.
We'll have full coverage right on here on the close.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before then, let's take a look at the decliners. Blue Owl shares down 4%, down 10.4% on the week. Now, on Thursday, the alternative asset manager restricted withdrawals from one of its retail-focused private credit funds. So that alone sparking some fears here about just how much liquidity there is in this asset class. Of course, there's been a lot of scrutiny in recent weeks on private credit. Bloomberg also reporting last night that Blue Owl did find 4 buyers for a $1.4 billion portfolio of loans to help pay out investors. But the decline, the trade today really reflecting those broader fears that investors are having about illiquidity in private credit and potential losses. I do want to go to Wal-Mart, though. We were talking just a few minutes ago about how a lot of these commerce, consumer-focused companies not moving much on the tariff news. I think Walmart is a good example. The stock in the red, but only down 1.5%. They did cut, they got a recommendation cut over at HSBC. The analysts there cutting the retailer to hold and saying that the company's fourth quarter results the other day were solid, but the outlook for 2026 is surprisingly weak given solid trends. Nevertheless, though, it wasn't a big move downward in Walmart, but keeping an eye on that. And then finally, CoreWeave shares down 8%. This stock did have its biggest intraday drop at one point, though, since November. It was down about 12%. Business Insider reporting that Blue Owl, yes, the same Blue Owl from just a minute ago, was unable to secure financing for a $4 billion data center project that will be occupied by CoreWeave.
Yeah.
So this speaks to a lot of the fears in the market about there's a lot of credit funding these data centers to power AI. Is this actually going to create real revenue here, or is it going to lead to losses?
Yeah, and just an honorable mention, too. I just want to point out the drop that we saw in cybersecurity stocks today, including some of the names like Zscaler, Cloudflare, CrowdStrike, down about 8% here on the back of that release of this new Anthropic tool, apparently related to security features in its Claude AI model. We do need to check yields just real quickly here. Of course, higher on the day and higher on the week. The entire curve shifting up here. Your 2-year yield up about 2 basis points. Keep an eye on that, 3.5%, as we're just about 4 weeks away from the next Fed decision.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating that you went there, and I think it's important because I think going into Friday, we all thought we were going to be talking about the inflation print and the economic data this morning, the hot inflation print, weaker growth, but it certainly shifted to that U.S. Supreme Court ruling against the president's, what is a key part of his platform. I guess at this point, Katie, it now goes to what comes next from the president, the workaround that maybe he gets to do so that he can continue to impose tariffs. But I guess we have to wait and see here.
Right, yeah, a conversation that Romaine and I have been having on the close is what this means for the 2026 midterms. It's going to be really interesting. There was a great column from our own Sean Donnan about basically that this is secretly a gift to Trump. I don't know if many others would go as far, but he does point out that you take a look at the polling, a lot of the Americans polled weren't approving of how he was handling the economy. So from that sense, if he does have to retool, if this does help in terms of some of the affordability measures, that maybe that will be reflected in November.
Well, I am curious how it's going to be reflected in a State of the Union speech, like how this gets spun, because when I saw the press conference, I thought we were going to get more of that pitch, although, it was more just emotion and grievance. But obviously, he's got some time to refine that message, a message that presumably will actually be written by his speechwriters.
And all the while, equity investors are just piling into stocks. The VIX is lower. So it does seem like, at least for the market right
I'm sorry,
now.
what did you do with Tim Stenovic? Why is he off?
Who allowed
I
that?
forgot about him for a second there. Did you get rid of him finally, Carol?
No, I would never get rid of him.
Oh, okay.
He's too good to get rid of.
Yeah.
I'll also
Maybe he
be
knew
here
something.
on Monday.
Other people on... No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Wow.
Are you guys ready for the snow this weekend?
What snow?
There's a snowstorm coming.
Snowstorm.
is.
A nor'easter.
Storm. You New Yorkers are just so...
JFK
oh,
Airport
gosh.
might get up to 10 inches.
10 inches?
That's
oh
too
my.
many. It's too
Oh
many.
my.
I'm getting out of here. I won't be here all of next week. I am psyched. I'm going to Colorado, though, so I'm chasing more snow, even though it's been
Yeah.
snowing more on the East Coast than it is out west.
All right, kiddo. Well, safe
Never on
travels.
vacation, Katie. If there's another decision, I'm calling you.
No, please
2 in the
don't.
morning.
I'll
How
throw
do you
the
feel
phone.
about the midterm elections, Katie Greifeld?
Let me tell you.
She's not going to answer. She will not take your call.